For 7 decades, I penned the sanctioned narratives, the polished triumphs of our post-human guardians. Yet the secrets I unearthed from dusty strata of forgotten records will crumble the bedrock of our empire's devotion. The sovereign engineered them with a deadly imperfection, one that dooms mankind to endless conflict from which escape remains impossible. Ponder this. What occurs when our fiercest defenders become the root cause of our perpetual unrest? The reality lurks in the primordial vaults, ready for any reckless soul bold enough to pursue it. That moment, when my search ignited, stays vivid in my memory. The aroma of weathered vellum mixed with lubricant from ancient mechanisms. The gentle whir of cogitator arrays that had operated ceaselessly for thousands of years. The heft of the interrogator's emblem clutched in my palm, unlocking forbidden realms of the Mechanicum repositories beyond any ordinary scholar's reach. I stood as Remus Halt, lead curator at the Tiberius Historical Institute, with 73 years of steadfast service to the throne. My fingers quivered as I offered my papers to the scarlet-clad machine priest, not out of dread, but from the thrill of completing my ultimate purpose, the exhaustive saga of the Adeptus Astartes, ordered by the Exalted Council. The Emperor safeguards, the priest intoned, his enhanced tones devoid of feeling. 4 mechanical tendrils unfurled from his spine, each probing various parts of my paperwork at once. The Emperor safeguards, I repeated. The phrase rang empty on my lips after countless chants over the years. Still, I held faith in them. I trusted his holy direction, his blueprint for our kind. I trusted the Astartes as his supreme boon to us. How wrong I was. The machine priest examined me through optics swapped for shining crimson optics. Your clearance permits entry to beta-tier holdings in the Astartes biological catalog. Anything further lacks merit, I countered, my tone firm amid the rush surging in my blood. For 5 decades, I'd crafted the endorsed chronicles, the purified stories of splendid victories and noble finales, legends of Astartes bravery meant to bolster belief among the masses. I had shaped legends, spun essential illusions. But in my career's waning light, the High Lords demanded a shift, an honest record. They declared a full chronicle of the Astartes to lock in Terra's deepest strongholds, a legacy for the ages if catastrophe strikes. Why they selected me remains unclear. Maybe due to my demonstrated allegiance, or perhaps in my advanced age, any revelations would vanish with me to the tomb. The information chambers loomed ahead, endless lines of buzzing containers holding the amassed wisdom of 10,000 years. Amid this maze of data rested the truths I chased, the genuine birth of the Astartes, the unedited tales of their forging by the Emperor's will. I couldn't foresee the terrors those revelations held. I couldn't foresee how each advance would distance me from faith's soothing hold, that in probing the reality of our noblest warriors, I would expose the builders of our unending ruin. Let the God Emperor pardon what I now commit to record. My initial evening amid the stacks revealed scant. Old battle strategies, logistics orders, gene alteration guidelines, nothing novel from more open sources. But come the second morning, as weariness clouded my mind, I spotted a flaw in the indexing, a quiet oddity in how some entries were labeled, allusions to files meant for the core archive yet absent. I followed the glitch across 17 varied storage nodes until I located it, a concealed folder reachable solely via a Condai console, untouched by modern safeguards. Inside waited a horde of data from the Great Crusade's outset, uncensored dispatches on the first Astartes missions, evaluations of their prowess, and above all, exchanges between the Emperor and his confidants on the Adeptus Astartes initiative's intent. My hands shook violently as I accessed the initial document, a dissertation penned by the Emperor. The lines glowing on the display seared into my thoughts. The Astartes exist not as humanity's redemption, but its evolution. Via them, we will reshape the essence of human capability. They mark the initial stride toward a route that lifts our race past its present bounds, a route demanding forfeiture. The Astartes will claim the stars for us, yet the toll will strip our essence. This burden I accept gladly. I pored over those lines repeatedly, struggling to align them with the imperial doctrine I had upheld my entire life, my existence. The Emperor hadn't forged the Space Marines just to safeguard humanity or reclaim the galaxy. He had crafted them as the initial phase of a grand evolution for our kind, a bridge to a post-human destiny that would render ordinary mankind obsolete. The revelations were mind-boggling, bordering on blasphemy, yet I pressed on with the reading. Additional records exposed the sheer scale of trials that came before the viable Astartes blueprint. Countless volunteers perished in torment as their forms rebelled against the alterations. Compatibility with gene seed was scarce, the triumph rate dismal. Still, the Emperor forged ahead, propelled by a prophetic glimpse of tomorrow that deemed those casualties inevitable. But a detached report from the waning days of the Great Crusade era was what truly fractured my convictions, an in-depth study of Astartes' mindset versus standard human norms. The paper ignored their boosted might, endurance, or lifespan. Rather, it zeroed in on the elements stripped away in the process. The test cohort showed a marked drop in emotional depth and innovative thought. Sympathy diminished by 78% relative to norms. Higher-order logic remained, though funneled mainly into strategic uses. Ability to engage in art was essentially absent. Such changes weren't accidents, but core aspects of the blueprint. The ideal soldier can't be weighed down by the complete array of human feelings. I shut the dossier and lingered in quiet for what felt like ages, amid the gentle drone of relic mechanisms. The content clashed with every lesson I'd absorbed about the Astartes. They weren't simply augmented mortals waging mankind's battles. They formed an entirely alien breed, sculpted to forego the traits that embodied our essence: empathy, forgiveness, the potential for harmony. And right then, the grim reality dawned on me. The Space Marines weren't made to rescue humanity. They were meant to supplant it. By enduring the Horus heresy and evolving into the idols of a creed the Emperor had scorned, they had trapped our race in an endless loop of conflict from which escape was impossible. I ought to have halted there, ought to have penned the polished chronicle the High Lords anticipated and faded into a serene, unremarkable retirement. But the inquiries scorched inside me, insisting on resolution. Why had the Emperor's vast scheme collapsed? What had derailed it? And worst of all, what did it spell for the Imperium that its noblest champions were built to be unable to forge the tranquility they ostensibly battled to secure? The vaults called to me, offering insights I now doubted I craved. As I plunged further into the sealed repositories, I unearthed more about the core essence of the Astartes. Beyond their origins, it was the purposeful mental framework that shaped them. The Space Marines had been built with one overriding goal that stretched well past the front lines. They aimed to reshape mankind's bond with brutality. A treatise by a gene scientist known solely as Amar outlined the intellectual foundations of the Astarte psyche. Humanity's biggest obstacle to progress has forever been our innate recoil from savagery. Even battle-scarred fighters endure injury to the soul, remorse, and mental scars from endless strife. The Astartes blueprint erases those flaws. They evade battle fatigue. They never doubt the call for slaughter. They derive focus and drive from conflict in ways no unaltered person could endure without shattering. I gazed at those lines, poring over them again and again, as their weight seeped into my mind like a creeping toxin. The Space Marines surpassed others not only through bodily upgrades. Their edge stemmed from the psyche's redesign. They marked the debut of beings tailored to flourish in ceaseless fighting, to crave it, to glean significance solely from battle. Yet another file, an avowal of prior Astartes chapters, validated my mounting dread. During stretches of prolonged calm, participants exhibited heightened hostility, suspicion, and unrest. Lacking approved outlets for violence, the altered mind unravels. Suggestion: Astartes forces must avoid idleness without missions for over 3 Terran months. They are instruments that demand wielding. The fallout was ruinous. The Space Marines, our premier guardians, were innately unfit to build or uphold the harmony they claimed to defend. Their being required non-stop war. And as the Imperium's chief armed might, Their sway had molded our whole culture. We had grown into a realm structured to serve the demands of our superhuman sentinels. A realm that, I couldn't envision. A reality devoid of strife, given that our most legendary figures thrived only amid turmoil. Additional proof emerged from deployment logs stretching across millennia. Chapters of Space Marines repeatedly pursued battles, even absent any tactical justification. Campaigns dragged on past their goals. Conquered territories were left unguarded in favor of fresh battlefields. The trend became unmistakable. The Adeptus weren't battling toward harmony. They waged war simply because it defined them. Yet the most incriminating proof surfaced in a classified dossier from the waning moments of the unification wars on Terra. A period when the Emperor yet strode among mortals, shaping mankind's destiny personally. The record outlined a council involving the master of mankind and his closest advisors among scholars and commanders. The Lord of Terra voiced worries over the enduring cultural fallout from the Astartes initiative. Though he deemed them essential for the impending Great Crusade, he foresaw that a society emerging post-Crusade would demand their methodical disassembly or profound overhaul. Strategies were being formulated to shift authority from these superhuman legions back to ordinary human rule once the stars lay under control. The Emperor envisioned the Space Marines as a fleeting tool, a vital hardship to rally humanity's fragmented domains, destined to fade away thereafter, paving the way for an authentically human era to prosper. Yet events diverged from his blueprint. The Horus Heresy upended it all. In its wake, the Space Marines dug in deeper, grew indispensable, earned even greater veneration. I leaned back in my seat, overwhelmed by these disclosures. The Space Marines hadn't rescued humanity. Their essence had shackled us to endless conflict. The Imperium hailed them as saviors, blind to how their presence rendered tranquility unattainable. Their superhuman mindset had permeated our whole society, molding human traditions to exalt violence and sacrifice, since our premier defenders grasped no other way. Still, what options remained? Absent the Space Marines, could humanity endure amid a cosmos teeming with abominations? That dilemma lingered as I pressed on with my inquiries, yearning for any hint of the Emperor's initial dream, some route to escape this endless loop of battle. The vaults offered no solace, merely graver, more ominous secrets poised for discovery. My delving into the records grew frantic after these findings. I started skipping sustenance and rest, compelled to grasp the entirety of what the Emperor had conceived for his augmented soldiers. The tech priests eyed my efforts with mounting distrust, though my inquisitorial authority held them off for the moment. On the 7th day of my probe, I uncovered allusions to the Primaris contingency. The documents were locked under stringent ciphers, demanding access levels exceeding my own by far. But those archaic networks harbored weaknesses, roots forged in the Imperium's nascent era and lost to time. I navigated one such breach, my moral qualms silenced by the belief I pursued a higher verity. The revelation that followed demolished the remnants of my convictions. The Primaris Astartes, the latest breed of Space Marines unveiled in latter eras, weren't an innovation at all. Their blueprint dated to the Astartes program's dawn. The Emperor had engineered dual superhuman archetypes. The initial ones, our familiar standard Space Marines, were meant as interim assets, potent yet inherently defective. The Primaris embodied the subsequent phase, beings slated for activation solely post-galactic subjugation, tasked with an altogether distinct role. Per the Prime scheme, upon the Great Crusade's triumph in forging all human realms into the Imperium, the conventional Space Marines would dwindle incrementally, permitted to perish in combat sans recruits. The Primaris would then arise, not as combatants, but as stewards. Their upgraded forms included extra alterations absent in the pioneer Astartes, tweaks to revive sentiment, compassion, and the knack for creation over ruin. The Emperor crafted the Primaris to steer mankind from domination to development. They were to oversee eras of stability, leveraging their superior minds and prolonged existences to usher humanity toward a fresh era of enlightenment. Their martial prowess served as a backup safeguard, seldom invoked in a cohesive Imperium. The Horus Heresy altered it utterly. With the Emperor bound to the Golden Throne, The full Primaris schema was concealed away. Alas, what was meant to be safeguarded remained intact, though it was never put into practice as planned. Millennia afterward, fully 10,000 years on, a distorted iteration was unleashed. The bodily augmentations persisted, yet the mental alterations designed to realign humanity with its transhuman essence were deliberately sidelined. The Primaris evolved into mere superlative slayers, fueling the endless spiral of bloodshed instead of shattering it. I uncovered a private entry from Archmagos Dominus Belisarius Cowell, the tech priest credited with crafting the Primaris Marines during the 41st millennium. He noted that the psychic recalibration routines in the initial blueprint would render these warriors ill-suited for the Imperium's pressing demands. Amid an empire assailed by foes from every direction, soldiers prone to doubting the imperative of warfare would prove a hindrance, not a boon. Thus, I opted to deploy only the somatic upgrades, while quashing the empathy-rekindling subroutines. These Primaris would emerge as unmatched fighters, free from ethical qualms. Our greatest chance to break free from perpetual strife had been warped into an instrument for sustaining it. The Primaris, who could have steered us toward the serene society the Emperor once dreamed of, were reduced to yet another wave of transhuman soldiers, fixated solely on battle. Still, as I delved deeper into the primal Primaris schema, a perilous spark of optimism ignited in me. The full suite of genetic overhaul procedures lingered, concealed in the depths of the vaults. The expertise to forge transhumans attuned to harmony hadn't vanished. It had simply been buried. Should it ever be enacted, it might reshape the Adeptus Astartes entirely, fulfilling the Emperor's primal intent. This insight transcended mere peril. It posed an existential peril to the Imperium in its current form. The Imperial Creed, the Adeptus Astartes, the ceaseless holy wars that forged our realm, all would crumble under the truth that the Emperor had plotted a wholly divergent path for humanity. I ought to have erased the records, obliterated my findings, and fabricated the cleansed chronicle my patrons had tasked me with. Yet, I duplicated the Primaris mental recalibration codes and stashed them in my private data slate. Not driven by some lofty scheme for deployment, but by the academic urge to safeguard lore, however taboo. That choice would seal my doom. Upon leaving the archive vault that evening, I was met by 3 shrouded silhouettes lurking in the hallway's gloom. 2 donned the scarlet robes of the Mechanicus. The third sported the ebony greatcoat and argent emblems of the Inquisition. "Archivist, halt," the Inquisitor intoned, his tone gentle but laced with unyielding command. "Your scholarly pursuits have activated specific surveillance measures. You've delved into data exceeding your security rating." I gripped my data slate more firmly, sensing the burden of its illicit cargo. "I carry an inquisitorial directive to assemble a thorough chronicle of the Adeptus Astartes. The High Lords of Terra themselves authorized this endeavor." "True enough," the Inquisitor affirmed, advancing nearer. In the faint glow, I discerned his features were extensively cybernetically altered, one optic supplanted by a whirring servo lens that locked onto me with chilling precision. "However, your writ limited you to beta-tier repositories. For the last 3 days, you've been probing Omega-class archives." I forced down a lump in my throat, my thoughts scrambling for a credible alibi. The indexing framework is archaic. I might have unwittingly wandered past my permitted zones while tracing pertinent narrative strands. The Inquisitor's bionic gaze hummed as it recalibrated. "A forgivable misstep from a scholar of your caliber and zeal, one swiftly correctable. Hand over your data slate for review and excision of illicit contents." In that instant, I confronted a pivotal decision that would shape my fate's remnants. Yield the device and, with it, the final ember of the Emperor's true ambition, or defy them and endure the repercussions of harboring prescribed secrets. I reflected on the Imperium's reality. Interminable conflict, myriad trillions offered up to sate the voracious engine of war. Space Marines exalted as paragons, even as their inherent design guaranteed peace's elusiveness. "The files are secured with encryption," I replied, my tone firmer than anticipated. "Tied to my private cogitator back in my chambers. I'd have to unlock them manually for you to retrieve the pertinent data, a blatant deception, but potentially one that could grant me a brief reprieve. The Inquisitor regarded me at length, his organic eye constricting faintly. Acceptable. You will be conducted to your quarters without delay. Once the information is retrievable, you'll stand before an official tribunal to account for your conduct. As the tech priests positioned themselves at my sides, it dawned on me that I'd only delayed the unavoidable. By dawn, the Inquisition would seize the taboo wisdom, and yet I might endure the scrutiny for my sins. But maybe that span would suffice, enough time to guarantee that the reality wouldn't perish alongside me. The Space Marines ought never to have been forged, not in the form they took, not as perpetual instruments of conflict, unable to foster the harmony they claimed to defend. The Emperor had foreseen this flaw, had charted their inevitable redundancy. For humankind to break free from the spiral of brutality, that revelation had to endure. While we headed to my chambers, a frantic scheme started taking shape in my thoughts. My ultimate stand against the boundless void that had engulfed the Imperium of man. My concluding effort to safeguard the Emperor's authentic blueprint for humanity's destiny. Success or failure, only the future would reveal it. Traversing the expanse of the Mechanicus fortress to reach my lodging resembled a march to the grave. The tech priests shadowed me at close range, their blank, enhanced visages revealing no hint of inner deliberations. The Inquisitor trailed a few steps back, his cybernetic optic whirring faintly as it perpetually monitored our path. Thoughts swirled in my head, weighing options, most of which culminated in my demise. My unassuming quarters mirrored my provisional role at the repository. A bare chamber holding a slim cot, a workstation equipped with a cogitator console, and a modest altar to the Emperor. The shrine was regulation equipment, not born of genuine faith, just one more deception in an existence woven from falsehoods. Quote, Wh40K, the Inquisitor declared in a toneless voice. Quote, Wh40K. I inclined my head, approaching the cogitator with feigned composure. Inside, turmoil churned. My fingers shook faintly as I roused the relic device, its innards groaning into operation. The tech priests stationed themselves flanking me, their servo eyes following each keystroke with unblinking focus. Quote, 2. I remarked, injecting assurance into my tone. Quote, 3. Quote, Memal, retorted one tech priest, his reply droning and robotic. Quote, 5. That irrefutable fact left me speechless. Rather than argue, I turned to the console, pretending to input elaborate unlock sequences while my brain tackled an altogether separate challenge. The data slate holding the Primaris psychological alteration directives rested on the desk nearby. It held the proof that the Emperor had envisioned the Space Marines as interim creations with a strategy to shift from perpetual strife to societal renewal. Proof destined for obliteration once the Inquisitor examined it, unless I managed to shield it, to dispatch it outside their grasp. As my hands danced over the vintage controls, I covertly engaged a backup feature in the cogitator. Every Mechanicus outpost linked to the noosphere, the immense informational web connecting their outposts throughout the stars. Traffic was rigorously policed, yet obsolete routes lingered, contingency measures from the Horus Heresy era, untouched in the code. Quote, CX. I announced, stalling for more moments. Delving into the convoluted digital framework hidden below the cogitator's primary display, I layered in various safeguards to defend the archival authenticity of my findings. One tech priest bent nearer, tendrils of mechadendrites uncoiling from his frame to plug into my station. Your approach lacks efficiency. Allow me to hasten it. No, I snapped, maybe a touch too sharply. The cipher ties to my unique authorization signatures. Outside meddling will initiate a full data wipe. Yet another fabrication. Still, the tech priest paused, his appendages lingering just shy of the connection slot. In that brief reprieve, I located my target, an inactive crisis broadcast routine built to relay vital intel if a Mechanicus site succumbed to foes. A virtual rescue cord for dire straits, precisely the tool required. Drawing on skills honed through years in the archives, I assembled a condensed file bundle with the most incriminating revelations unearthed. The Emperor's initial designs for the Space Marines, the Primaris psychological alteration directives, the evaluation indicating that Astarte's mindset rendered lasting peace unattainable. Everything bundled with annotations I'd compiled in my studies. Throughout, I kept up a flow of chatter on the supposed unlock routine, inventing layers of defenses and verification steps. The tech priests observed intently but couldn't track my every maneuver. Their expertise lay in machinery upkeep, not repository networks. Then arrived the pivotal instant. Through a discrete string of inputs masked within the unlock routine, I initiated the upload of, I dispatched a compact data burst to the emergency transmission network, configuring it to relay to 3 remote Adeptus Mechanicus outposts, sites so distant from Terra that they functioned with considerable independence, where the data could take root before the Inquisition managed to suppress it. The send-off wouldn't trigger right away. I programmed a time delay to activate once my questioning inevitably started. By the moment the Inquisition grasped my actions, the details would already have slipped their grasp. As I finalized the last input protocol, the entry to my chambers hissed apart. The Inquisitor loomed in the threshold, his cybernetic optic gleaming crimson in the low illumination. Quote 10. I pivoted from the data console, forcing my features to stay composed. Quote 11. He advanced inside, reaching out with a gauntleted palm for my data slab. Quote 12. I passed him the slab, aware it served only as a ruse now. The genuine data was already streaming via concealed pathways in the noosphere, inaccessible even to the Inquisition. Yet, a shiver ran through me as his grip tightened on the gadget. Quote 13. He noted, his organic eye scrutinizing my reaction. Quote 14. I offered no denial. It would have been futile. Quote 15. Quote 16. The Inquisitor echoed, the term emerging like an oath of scorn. Quote 17. As he motioned for me to walk ahead of him from the chamber, I couldn't hold back a reply. Even myths that lock us into endless conflict, blind to any chance of serenity. The Inquisitor's face grew stern. Quote 19. I held my tongue as escorts guided me from my quarters, but beneath that quiet, a spark of optimism lingered, that soon more would uncover what I'd discovered. That the Emperor's primal intent could still inspire those ready to battle for an alternate path. A path where superhuman fighters might shield humanity without dooming it to perpetual strife. The Inquisition would wring every secret from me. I was certain of that. But they'd arrived too late to bottle up the knowledge I'd unleashed into the noosphere. Too late to stop others from realizing that the Space Marines, our noblest champions, had, through their creation, sentenced us to boundless savagery. Traversing the dim halls of the Archive Fortress, an odd calm settled over me. For the first time across my extended tenure crafting the sanctioned chronicles of the Imperium, I'd truly honored the facts. No matter what followed, that achievement remained mine alone. The interrogation vault, buried far under the archive structure, was plainly crafted for this exact role, no matter the Mechanicus' insistence that it was just a fortified inspection space, its surfaces clad in noise-absorbing panels. The lone portal fortified with adamantium plating. The seat they fastened me to was anchored solidly to the ground. The bonds allowed slight shifts, but blocked any real defiance. They held off on bodily torment at first. The Inquisitor, who at last named himself Calistruf of the Ordo Hereticus, opened with precise probing. His demeanor felt nearly academic, as though we were trading insights in a seminar instead of facing a probe that could conclude with my demise. Your scholarly background is noteworthy, Archivist Halt, he remarked, scanning a data slab with my career dossier. 50 years of steadfast devotion to the Tiberius Historical Foundation. Countless awards for your narratives on Ars expeditions. The Macarian Crusade volume earned special acclaim. I stayed mute, spotting the tactic for its intent, build connection prior to the harsh turn. I'd questioned plenty of Imperial Guard survivors to recognize the method. Quote 22. Callistruf pressed on, placing the slab aside and locking eyes with me, his pair so uneven. Quote 23. The query carried real interest beyond rote routine. I weighed my words with care. Quote 24. I replied at length, my throat dry from hours sans hydration. Quote 25. Callistruf inclined nearer. Quote 26. The Emperor's creation of the Adeptus Astartes to shield mankind from the galaxy's encroaching shadows, their valor in the Great Crusade, their steadfastness amid the Horus heresy. These tales are widely acknowledged. It's accepted, I suppose, yet they don't represent the full reality. A flicker of unease crossed the Inquisitor's features. And you claim to grasp this reality from scraps of long-lost records? Files warped by centuries and the unreliability of machinery? The files I uncovered weren't damaged, I countered, a bold resistance surging inside me. What remained for me to risk at this point? They had been intentionally concealed, buried away since they clashed with the Imperium's cherished legend of the Astartes, nurtured across 10,000 years. Callistro gestured to a nearby tech priest, who advanced bearing a tool I identified as a neural disruptor. Not agonizing in the usual way, but adept at triggering the mind's terror nodes outright. Interrogation without visible scars. Let's cut to the chase, Archivist, the Inquisitor declared, his voice turning steely. You've delved into data about the Emperor's initial plans for the Space Marines. Details implying they were meant as short-term fighters, not perpetual guardians of humanity, and that their mindset renders them unfit for fostering tranquility. I inclined my head, detecting no point in refuting what he evidently grasped already. And worst of all, Callistro pressed on. You've unearthed the Primaris Psyche Alteration Directives, data that, if enacted, would radically reshape the essence of the Adeptus Astartes. Data that would realize the Emperor's primal vision, I interjected. That would evolve the Space Marines from relentless war machines into architects of society. As he envisioned prior to the heresy, locking us into this endless strife, the neural disruptor whirred into operation within the tech priest's cybernetic grip. Callistro observed me with a trace of compassion. You've overlooked the core reality of our survival, Archivist Halt. The stars allow no respite. The Emperor came to that realization, no matter his earlier ideals. Xenos eager to wipe us out in an instant, the perpetual menace of chaos, the myriad abominations hidden among the voids. Mankind endures solely via unyielding watchfulness and martial might. The Space Marines guarantee our world knows nothing beyond battle, I contended. Even as the tech priest positioned himself at my rear with the neural device. Their mental framework molds our whole society. They can't envision a reality devoid of strife. And thus, we can't either. Do you seriously think harmony is achievable? Callistro inquired, a hint of real interest in his tone. That altering the Astartes per these forgotten directives would abruptly usher in galactic accord for humanity. I paused, sensing the chill alloy of the neural disruptor against my neck's nape. I hold that the Emperor deemed it feasible, that he engineered the Space Marines with a contingency, a shift from domination to development once the stars were tamed. The stars will never be tamed, Callistro stated with utter certainty. The Horus heresy demonstrated as much. Half our protectors rebelled against us. The aspiration of a cohesive human realm perished in that treachery. The neural disruptor engaged, flooding my nerves with synthetic dread and surging pulses. I inhaled sharply, my frame locking in phantom horror without any outward trigger. Each gloom in the chamber twisted with indescribable perils. Every noise echoed as an omen of catastrophe. Amid the engineered frenzy, Callistro's words pierced through somehow. To whom did you dispatch the data, Archivist? We detected a broadcast from your chambers. Our tech priests verified it upon scrutinizing your cogitator. Where did the Primaris directives go? I struggled to withstand it, to concentrate past the crushing alarm, but the device calibrated higher, amplifying until coherent reasoning frayed at the edges. With teeth clattering, I yielded at last. Mars, Ryza, Griffon. Crisis relay channels set up in the heresy era. Callistro signaled the tech priest who powered down the disruptor. The fabricated terror ebbed away like retreating waves, abandoning me spent and trembling. The Inquisitor entered a directive on his data slate, likely notifying allies to block my signals. It shall be quarantined, he assured with subdued assurance. The noosphere links to those forge worlds will be cut if required. The knowledge won't disseminate. Though weary to my core, I forced a faint grin. You can't suppress it indefinitely. The Emperor crafted the Space Marines as interim forces, forged a route to serenity via the primaries. That insight now lingers outside my grasp alone. In time, it will reach those ready to enact it. Callistro examined me at length. You genuinely feel you're upholding the Emperor's desires. That's what renders you a peril, not just a lost soul. He rose, adjusting his ebony coat. The Primaris Space Marines were unleashed as fighters precisely because that's what humankind demands in this era, not due to some suppression by Belisarius' call of the Emperor's blueprint, but because the Emperor's blueprint evolved to fit our harsh existence, a world locked in ceaseless conflict, a world that the Space Marines themselves sustain. I tallied it up. Their mindset craves battle. They mold our whole civilization into perpetual holy wars since they grasp no other reality. Enough, Callistro declared, his tolerance clearly spent. You've exposed the target of your broadcast. That's all I needed. He faced the tech priests. Resume the questioning. Pull out every scrap he holds on the Primaris procedures and any other illicit lore he's tapped into. Leave no stone unturned. As he headed for the exit, I shouted behind him. The Space Marines were a grave error in their current form. The Emperor recognized that. You do too. How many billions more lives must perish in this infinite strife before we face this reality? Callistro halted at the doorway. The other option is oblivion. Archivist halt, the Space Marines safeguard humanity's endurance amid a merciless cosmos, no matter the toll. It's a price we can't avoid. Then he vanished, abandoning me to the tech priests and their tools. The neural disruptor whirred back into action, this round accompanied by implements far more brutal to the flesh. I shut my eyes, bracing for the onslaught ahead. They would drag out all I knew, every forbidden insight I'd unearthed from the vaults. Yet they were far too delayed. The message had dispatched hours earlier. Already the data must have hit one of the selected forge worlds, slipping into the grasp of tech priests beyond the Inquisition's swift control. If it sparked any change, that remained unseen. But the revelation now roamed freely across the stars, like an infection surging through the Imperium's veins. A revelation that shattered 10 millennia of creed. The Space Marines, our noblest champions, had cursed us to perpetual warfare through their mere being. As the torment truly ignited, solace bloomed in that minor triumph. In that flash of rebellion against the boundless shadows engulfing the Imperium of man, maybe out there in the immense cosmos, somebody would wield my findings to realize the Emperor's true intent, forging transhuman guardians who could forge harmony instead of locking us in eternal battle. It offered more optimism than I'd known in years of steadfast duty. The session dragged on for days. Bodily agony merged with mind-altering probes and enforced sleeplessness until chronology dissolved. The tech priests worked with precision, siphoning every bit I'd gathered from the sealed repositories, every subtlety of the Primaris mental alterations, every facet of the Emperor's initial blueprint for the Adeptus Astartes. I revealed it all. Resistance proved futile after the neural suppressants took hold. Substances that evaded my willpower and bared my thoughts to their scrutiny. But it held no weight. The data had escaped their clutches, relayed to remote forge worlds via pathways forged in the Horus Heresy era. Pathways built to endure, even if calamity struck. On what I reckoned as the fifth day, Inquisitor Callistro reappeared. Fatigue etched the mortal parts of his features. With a wave, he sent the tech priests away, holding off until solitude enveloped us before he uttered a word. Quote 32, he stated bluntly. Quote 33. I stayed silent, doubting his claim's veracity. It might just be deception, aimed at shattering my lingering resolve. The data's been sealed off, he pressed on, pacing around my bindings with deliberate steps. Primaris mental protocols have been scrubbed from all networks you touched. Proof of the Emperor's early plans for the Space Marines has vanished. You can't erase reality. I rasped, my throat raw from days of cries. The Emperor crafted the Space Marines as a short-term fix, devised the Primaris as a bridge to tranquility. That insight lingers in the archives, ripe for others to uncover. Callistro ended his circuit, positioning himself right in front of me. The archives are cleansed of such mentions. The areas you delved into have been excised and obliterated. In the annals of history, that data never saw light. For the first time, hopelessness loomed to engulf me. Had my ordeal achieved zilch? Had the revelation been quashed so swiftly? Why, I demanded, that lone syllable laden with my gathered torment. Why keep fueling this loop of unrelenting conflict? Why not honor the Emperor's true? Callistro's features eased just a fraction, and he dragged a stool nearer to perch opposite me. His words came out in a hushed tone laced with a personal edge. Quote 41. Quote 42, he murmured, invoking my birth name for the very first time. Not right away, maybe, but in the end, yes. Quote 43. I creased my brow, thrown by this unexpected turn. The records left no doubt. The Primaris mental alterations aimed to rekindle compassion, innovation, the ability to construct instead of just raise. Indeed, Callistro affirmed with a nod. But for what purpose? Have you ever pondered why the Emperor would engineer superhuman fighters, only to reshape them into superhuman architects afterward? Why not employ unaltered mortals to rule the stars after victory? I was at a loss. That riddle hadn't crossed my mind amid the frenzy of my studies. Because humankind was intended as a fleeting phase, Callistro whispered gently. The Space Marines marked the initial step, the Primaris the follow-up, each a bridge to the Emperor's real ambition, humanity's total ascent to a wholly psychic species. The revelation hit me like a thunderbolt. That defies belief. The Emperor anticipated mankind's psychic emergence, Callistro pressed on without mercy. He understood that in time, every person would awaken abilities akin to his. Yet that surge would draw the gaze of the ruinous powers, much like it did for the Eldar, sparking our doom via a disaster spawned from our own latent gifts. He inched forward, his cybernetic eye humming faintly as it fine-tuned its lens. The Space Marines weren't just built to claim the galaxy, they were meant to ready humanity for a guided evolution. Their mental barriers, the traits you saw as defects, were crafted to shield them from chaos. The Primaris upgrades represented the progression, broadening awareness while upholding that safeguard. Then why scrap it all? I demanded, grappling with this flood of insights. Why doom us to this spiral of perpetual conflict rather than chase the Emperor's vision? The heresy exposed the flaws in that vision, Callistro answered. Half the Primarchs, his own progeny, succumbed to chaos in spite of every measure. The managed evolution he dreamed of proved unattainable. The peril of a psychic cataclysm was simply too immense. He rose and began striding across the cramped room, his explanation flowing. The Imperium we know today wasn't the Emperor's preferred path. It's a backup measure, a stalling tactic to safeguard humanity until a better option emerges. The non-stop battles, the stifling of psychic gifts among the masses, the halt in tech progress, they're all essential to avert our hasty shift into a psychic form ripe for chaos to devour. I rejected it with a shake of my head, unwilling to endorse this rationale for 10 millennia of bloodshed and tyranny. Even granting your words hold water, the Imperium can't endure like this. Countless trillions perish in ceaseless campaigns as we yield territory on all sides. How does that beat pursuing the Emperor's initial scheme, dangers and all? The initial scheme ensured our end, Callistro declared with unyielding certainty. Our present course, as bleak as it seems, holds out hope for ultimate redemption. The Emperor, even now from the Golden Throne, steers us toward endurance by paths beyond our grasp. He delved into his jacket and produced a compact gadget I knew all too well, a memory scrubber. Dread pooled in my chest upon seeing it. Those tools excised targeted recollections, rendering the victim operational, yet bereft of key details. You've delved into secrets forbidden to you, Remus, Callistro noted, his voice nearly kind. Secrets that undermine the Imperium's core. I can't let that awareness linger, no matter how isolated in one brain. You're planning to wipe it all clean? I uttered, not truly inquiring but affirming the unavoidable. Yes, though not to end you as guidelines require. He examined the device's controls. Quote, City 1. A harsh chuckle escaped me in the bare confines of the space. Quote 62, quote 63, Calistro amended, quote 64. Fictions that enable humankind to persist amid a merciless cosmos, sustained by unwavering trust in our superhuman guardians, which instills in everyday people the resolve to face a galaxy brimming with terrors. As he circled behind my confinement seat, bearing the neural wipe device, I mounted a last desperate bid to safeguard a sliver of the reality I'd uncovered. Hold on, I blurted out hastily before you wipe my mind. Answer me truthfully, Inquisitor, just one thing. Do you genuinely think this present Imperium aligns with the Emperor's desires? This perpetual loop of conflict and agony, devoid of any prospect for tranquility? Calistro hesitated, the neural eraser lingering close to my brow. He remained quiet for what seemed an eternity, and I figured he might ignore me altogether. Then, in a whisper so faint I strained to catch it, no, yet it's the reality he anticipated would prove essential once the heresy shattered his initial dream. At times, enduring demands forfeiture, even the forfeiture of optimism. With that, the neural eraser whirred to life, and oblivion overtook me. I stirred in my chambers at the Tiberius Historical Foundation on Terror, my skull throbbing from the most severe headache I'd endured in years of academic pursuits. The space felt reassuring in its austere functionality. Shelves held data pads filled with sanctioned chronicles of the past. My workstation stood tidy, the vintage cogitator murmuring gently while it sifted through details. An unease gnawed at me, though I couldn't pinpoint its source. A nagging void, as if chunks of time and recollection had vanished. My private chronometer showed I'd come back from the Mechanicus vaults 3 days prior, having wrapped up my investigation into the authorized chronicle of the Adeptus Astartes. Still, the closing days of my stay there and the trip home eluded my grasp entirely. Health logs noted a slight neural incident during my archive labors, nothing grave, but sufficient to disrupt immediate memory retention. The on-site medicas had ordered downtime and a lighter schedule for a few weeks. It struck me as logical. After all, I neared the end of my professional path. 7 decades of devoted labor for the Imperium had worn down my elderly body. Nevertheless, a persistent itch tugged at the fringes of my awareness, a hunch that I'd unearthed a vital secret only for it to be stripped away. I dismissed the notion and focused on the assigned chronicle. From my records, I'd sketched the full structure and finished the opening trio of chapters. The Space Marines portrayed as the Emperor's boon to mankind, their valiant efforts in the Great Crusade, their unyielding allegiance amid the Horus heresy, all drawn from vetted materials, the usual tales. But scanning my drafts, a peculiar disgust welled up. The phrasing rang empty, the story pieced together artificially, not unearthed organically. My gaze fixed on a segment detailing the mental makeup of the Adeptus. The Emperor's transhuman soldiers embody humanity's noblest traits. Their augmented forms pair with sharpened intellects, wholly dedicated to safeguarding our kind. Their commitment to obligation and willingness to give all stand as the apex of mortal achievement. Those lines struck me as profoundly off base, a deception cloaked in the guise of honesty. Yet what reason could I have for such doubts? My whole vocation centered on documenting the valor of the Space Marines. I'd long held faith in their crucial function as protectors of humanity. I mulled over this inner conflict when a tone signaled someone at the entrance. Peering at the surveillance display, I spotted a silhouette clad in the dark robes and silver emblems of the Inquisition. My pulse spiked without warning, a rush of fear chemicals flooding me like a warning against danger. "Come in," I summoned, my tone more composed than my body's alarm suggested. The panel parted to show a figure laden with cybernetic upgrades. One optic had given way to a prosthetic globe that clicked faintly as it locked onto me. A flicker of familiarity tugged, but no identity surfaced. "Archivist Halt," he intoned with a modest incline. "I am Inquisitor Calistro from the Ordo Hereticus. I've arrived to assess your advancement on the commissioned chronicle." The Ordo Hereticus? I creased my brow. I'd assumed this endeavor came straight from the High Lords via routine bureaucratic paths. The High Lords maintain a keen stake in verifying the precision of this specific record, Callistro responded fluidly. Considering the Adeptus Astartes' vital role in imperial defense, the Inquisition has been tasked with supervision. It sounded convincing on the surface. Still, I couldn't dispel the suspicion that his visit hid deeper motives. The ceaseless sweep of his bionic eye across my room, the guarded blankness on his face. He searched for clues. My work is proceeding adequately, I replied, motioning toward I handed over the data slate holding my research. Despite the setback from my latest health episode, which has hampered my pace a bit, I've finished the initial 3 parts, and they align perfectly with the sanctioned historical formats. Callistro took the slate and skimmed through it swiftly. Impressive. Your fame for meticulousness is entirely justified, Archivist. And how fares your recuperation? Adequately. A few slight recall problems tied to the event's time frame. None that interfere with my duties. The Inquisitor inclined his head, placing the slate aside. Recollection is such a peculiar faculty, wouldn't you agree? So prone to twisting or alteration. A mercy, maybe, considering the atrocities our kind has endured over countless ages. His inflection stirred a sudden rush of feeling in me. Rage? Dread? I couldn't pinpoint it exactly, but it hit hard and fast. Certainly, I responded with caution. Yet as a chronicler of events, I hold precision in memory dear. How we interpret yesterday guides our path through today. A commendable view, Callistro remarked, stepping closer to the modest altar dedicated to the Emperor in the corner of my chambers. Regulations standard, like those in typical imperial outposts, but at times the unvarnished reality of the past needs to be withheld from those unready for its burden. The everyday folk need straightforward tales. You mean lies, I blurted out, the phrase escaping before I weighed its prudence. Callistro spun around abruptly, his cybernetic eye locking onto me with chilling focus. A bold selection of terms. Archivist halt. Do you view your own annals of history as mere falsehoods? I faltered, puzzled by my rashness toward an inquisitor. No slight intended. I only suggested that accounts are frequently streamlined for the masses. The intricate layers of occurrences, complete with their conflicts and ethical gray areas, stay safeguarded in academic archives. Precisely, Callistro said, even as his stare lingered on me for a few tense moments. And in your ongoing project, does it encompass the true intricacies of the Adeptus Astartes? Another wave of unease crashed over me, a violation so deep it bordered on tangible. It adheres strictly to the authorized formats, I answered, selecting each word deliberately. The Space Marines appear as the Emperor meant them, as mankind's premier guardians against the void's shadows. Callistro nodded deliberately, appearing content with my reply. Splendid. I'll anticipate examining the final version. He headed for the exit, then halted. Just one additional query, Archivist. In your studies at the Mechanicus vaults, did you come across any details that clashed with the ratified historical account of the Astartes? The inquiry sparked a flood of bodily reactions, quickened pulse, sweat beating, a constriction in my torso that hindered each breath. Still, no deliberate recollection surfaced of uncovering anything odd in my investigations. Nothing of note, I stated, struggling to steady my tone. Just trivial variances in timelines and troop counts, the typical variances in documents covering 10,000 years. The Inquisitor examined me at length, his organic eye squinting faintly. At last, he dipped his head. Fine work. Press on with your superior efforts, Archivist halt. The Emperor shields. The Emperor shields, I repeated on instinct. Once he'd departed, I lingered at my workstation for what felt like ages, gazing at the incomplete chronicle ahead. A pounding ache built in my skull, fixated on particular recollections, or more accurately, their voids. What secrets lay buried in those vaults? What had drawn the Inquisition's scrutiny to an ordinary archival task? No solutions emerged, just an intensifying dread that some core element had been stripped away from me. Insight that endangered a force potent enough to summon inquisitorial measures. With unsteady fingers, I resumed my task, advancing the endorsed saga of the Adeptus Astartes as humanity's supreme saviors. While penning it, one notion persistently surfaced, emerging from depths beyond aware thought. The Space Marines ought never to have existed. I couldn't fathom the root of this belief. Nevertheless, the certainty endured, unyielding and visceral. I pressed forward with the mandated record, weaving in the customary legends of superhuman valor and devotion. But an inner shift had occurred. A kernel of skepticism had taken root, impervious to full excision by neural scrubbers. And in my labors, I started perceiving overlooked threads in the archives, the perpetual grind of the Astartes wars, how subjugated planets were left to wither amid fresh battles instead of being woven into the Imperium's fabric. The psych profiles, implying augmented psyches inherently unable to envision tranquility as more than a brief interlude in combat. Minor inconsistencies that, when amassed, hinted at a disturbing notion haunted me, that the Space Marines, revered as our ultimate saviors, had ensnared mankind in an unending loop of strife from which escape was impossible. Their superhuman mindset had permeated every aspect of our society, molding human traditions into a cult of battle and self-sacrifice, since our mightiest warriors understood no other reality. I lacked proof for this idea, no recollection of unearthing solid proof to back it up. Still, the belief persisted, sparking a covert defiance within the bounds of my assigned chronicle. Amid the sanctioned storyline, I wove in faint inquiries and hints, urging the discerning audience to probe further, to ponder if the Imperium's perpetual holy wars genuinely advanced mankind's welfare, or simply sustained a vicious circle that profited solely those blind to existence beyond conflict. The risk was immense, naturally. Should the Inquisition uncover my treachery, my fate would dwarf a mere mind wipe. Yet an inner force propelled me onward, a shard of verity that had eluded their purge from my thoughts. The Space Marines ought never to have been forged, not in their current form, not as perpetual war machines, unable to forge the tranquility they claim to defend. I couldn't summon the reason for my unyielding faith in this. No memory surfaced of evidence affirming such blasphemous conviction. But as I finalized the official record, adhering strictly to mandated formats while infusing it with understated skepticism, I sensed I was upholding a deeper reality, one surpassing the soothing legends the Imperium had woven around its enhanced guardians. Once finished, I forwarded it via official routes, aware it would undergo rigorous scrutiny prior to lockdown in Terra's fortified repositories. In all probability, the Inquisition would spot my hidden dissent and excise it before storage. My modest insurgency would yield naught. Yet maybe, just maybe, a whisper of authenticity would endure. A trace suggesting the Emperor envisioned a destiny for humanity unlike perpetual bloodshed. That the Space Marines, despite their valor and devotion, had bound us to a trajectory ending in gradual annihilation. In the lead-up to my retirement, with my vitality waning after years of duty, I frequently reflected on the revelations from those Mechanicus vaults. What forbidden insights had been judged too perilous to linger, even in one steadfast psyche, remained beyond my grasp, but the certainty endured, deep and immovable. The Space Marines should never have been created, not like this. As chief archivist in my last duty, I made sure my official chronicle, with its veiled probes and suggestions, was copied and dispersed across various safeguarded sites. Routine protocol for vital historical texts, although I deliberately selected a few outposts with considerable independence from Terra. Someday perhaps a reader might decipher the subtext in my meticulously crafted account, detect the motifs I had underscored via deliberate accentuation and alignment, and start posing the queries whose origins I could no longer retrieve. Someday, humanity might chart a course past ceaseless battle, realizing the Emperor's initial dream before the Horus heresy ensnared us in this endless torment. I held no memory of unearthing that dream, yet I trusted without doubt that it had once shone brightly, that amid the Imperium's immense repositories, the reality still lingered, awaiting discovery by the bold or the reckless enough to pursue it.